I was one of the first, along with Ann and others, IDignity board members, probably some of the best service I've done in this community since I've lived here. But I don't think Michael asked me here because I was a board member. He asked me here because, I've been in this field of addiction and mental health, it seems like my whole life. I'm pretty old, but it's been a long time that I've worked in this field. Every person who walks through that line on Thursday mornings that IDignity holds a program has a story. You'll hear one of those stories today. Many of those people that walk through those lines have a serious mental illness, have lived through trauma, are dealing with alcoholism or drug addiction, but they have a story. And there's a reason they fell on those hard times. And it could be because of that mental illness. It could be because of that addiction. It could be being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's not because they're all poor, and it's not because they're all homeless. It's because they've fallen on bad times, and they need assistance. And that's what IDignity does. So that's why Michael asked me here today, is to talk about those stories. What I'll tell you is that addiction and mental illness are diseases. There might be some folks in this room who disagree with that. The American Medical Association would disagree with you because they are brain diseases. They struggle with compulsion. They struggle with obsession. They struggle with constant shame and failure. Failing the ones they love, failing themselves, and they live with that shame, which usually continues to keep them in the situation they're in. There are people in this room who know someone with an addiction or a mental illness, who may love them, who may live with them. But we all know someone close to us who deals with this issue day in and day out. We may know some people who are in recovery who live one day at a time because they know they can't change yesterday. They have no control that they'll have tomorrow, but they live for today. Being sober, being clean, or being free from the symptoms of their mental illness for today, because that's all that we're promised. I say that this is a chronic disease because it meets every category of what a psychiatrist or what a medical or a physician would say is a disease. It's chronic, it's progressive, and without treatment, it will kill you. And there's no doubt that that is true of addiction, and there is no doubt that is true of mental illness. So there are two ways out, two choices. There's continued use, which will lead to prison, jail, or death, or there's recovery. 12-step programs have proven, for the most part, to help individuals work through that one day at a time. But that disease never goes away. It's always dormant and waiting inside you. Imagine what that's like. Imagine your day, every day that you get up, you fight the urge to use, or you fight the depression, or you fight the schizophrenia that lives inside you. Now, there's tons of treatment for it, but every day you deal with that knowing you have this disease. It's like diabetes. Every day you wake up knowing what you have to do to take care of yourself, to follow the instructions that your doctor has given you. And that's how you're going to live your life for the rest of your life, one day at a time. I would tell you that relapse is a part of recovery. Very seldom have I seen in my long career people get clean and sober without having a relapse. Some do, most do not. Relapse isn't the end of the world. Rarely have I seen a person with a psychiatric disorder follow all their psychiatric, their regimen of treatment, take their psychotropic medication, and not have any ill effects of their psychosis or their depression comes back or their anxiety. Rarely have I seen that happen. And rarely have I seen someone with diabetes not have the ill effects of their disease. I will tell you that this is a disease that runs rampant in our community right now. We've seen opiate addiction, we've seen cocaine and crack, and all those drugs devastate our communities across this country, and here in Orange County is no different. But what I will tell you is there is hope. For those individuals, a lot of us think, I can pull myself up by my bootstraps every day and get up and move forward. That's not easy when you have a disease. So what I will tell you today is there are many, an addict and alcoholic, that in their recovery, and perhaps in their 12-step programs, that will utter these words each and every day. And each and every day that they are clean and sober, for it is, a day at a time, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Donna. I'd like to introduce to you somebody very special to IDignity. Dana Denton was served by IDignity in March, just a few months ago. And the very next day, she came to IDignity on Thursday, the very next day, she got a job. Dana's going to share her story with you this morning. It takes a lot of courage to stand up here. I told you you were all her friends, and you're a very loving audience. So please welcome Dana Denton.
I'll do this. First, is this thing on? Okay. First, I want to say thank you to everyone sitting here. And good morning. Good morning. Y'all, please be patient with me. Okay. I started using drugs when I was 13 years old. At 17, I got pregnant, and I dropped out of school. Eventually, my drug addiction took over my whole life, and I ended up in prison. In spite of the darkest choices a person can make, I have always believed in second chances. You could say prison was a second chance for me because I chose to make it that way. While in prison, I enrolled in classes and I got my GED. Once I was out of prison, I had a very tough decision to make. I could move to Texas and live with my mom, which would also mean being away from my children. Or I could return to Polk County to be with my children. I was afraid of the bad influences that I would be exposed to in Polk County. So I decided to move to Texas so that I could get stronger. and worked to save money with the goal of returning to Polk County to be with my children. Once I was strong enough emotionally and physically and had saved up some money, I moved back to Polk County. I was hopeful and excited to see my children, but my purse was stolen 2 days after I arrived. I went to the Social Security office and was turned away because I didn't have a birth certificate. And I was told that I needed a power of attorney, which I couldn't afford, to help me obtain my birth certificate. With no ID or the means to get an ID, I began to spiral downward. I was desperate and hopeless because without an ID, I couldn't get a job, and without a job, I couldn't support myself or my children. I did the only thing I knew what to do to earn money which didn't require an ID. And that was to sell and eventually start using drugs again. I was arrested for drugs and was put on probation for 18 months, along with 6 months jail time. My time was almost up, and I was worried about being released from jail because I still didn't have an ID. Without an ID, I not only didn't exist, I was at risk of returning to a life that was desperate and hopeless. Before I was released, I went to work release program. It was there that I learned about IDignity from another inmate. If I could stick all of you in my pocket, I would take us all back to the day I got my job. I owe that day to IDignity, because that day my life was given back to me. Excuse me. I didn't really know what to expect from IDignity when I arrived on March 15th. But I was afraid that they would judge me because the life I had lived and the things I have done. That couldn't have been further from the truth. They were there with open arms. It was amazing how willing they were to help me. The number of volunteers, that blew my mind. I wish I could bottle up my feelings that day and give a bottle to every one of you. On Thursday, March 15th, IDignity changed the direction of my life. I walked away with an ID that day, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was complete. A huge burden was lifted off my chest. This ID gave me the strength that I didn't know I had, the strength I desperately needed. See, my IDignity story gets even better. You see, on March the 19th, just 4 days later, the ID opened the doors to a job that I have now been at for 2 months. And in these 2 months, my self-worth has grown tremendously. I have been able to prove to my employers at A&M Metal Finishing that I was a good choice. I am grateful to the owners for taking a chance on me and for providing incentives to keep me motivated. I have already received 2 raises and a job promotion. So see, even though you don't know me, each one of you are a part of my story, because you either have given to IDignity or you're here to learn about it. The money raised today does more than just provide identification. It provides endless possibilities of a better life. Thank you. I have one more thing.
Okay.
Thank you. I have one more thing to say. Miss Ann, on behalf of A&M Metal Finishing and Salone and Rick Hunter, I would like to give you a check to help out.
She had hoped that her boss could be here this morning, but she could not, so she sent a check to IDignity. Thank you.